right, so now I think we have everybody here and we can get started. So, everybody, please give a warm welcome to Gina Gagliano, the publishing director for Random House Graphic. And Gina, before she was at Random House, was the longtime marketing director for First Second. And she's also the co-host of the graphic novel TK podcast. And you've been responsible for countless amazing programming at festivals from Toronto to New York to all over the place. I don't know how I can sum up your career in graphic novels, Gina, because you've done so much. And you definitely are one of the best book marketers in the industry. I can say that hands down.
Oh, that's so kind of you to say, Janna. Thank you so much.
So I guess I'm just gonna, Gina, you already saw a lot of the questions that I got from the community here, and there were so many good ones. And so I think we're just gonna dive in. How should I guess I'll ask the questions. I generally like it if people here in the community can ask the questions, because this feels a little bit more interactive, but because I got such specific, interesting questions up front, and the vast majority of them came from one person, I feel like it might be better for me to just get started. And I think these questions are going to prompt even more questions from you guys. So hopefully we'll have time to have a little Q&A at the end. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right. So Gina, why don't you start off by talking in very broad strokes about the vision of Random House Graphic and like what you're doing at Random House Graphic.
Yeah, so Random House Graphic is a relatively new graphic novel publisher. We're a little over a year old at this point. Our motto at Random House Graphic is a graphic novel on every bookshelf. And that encompasses everything for kids in a lot of different ways. We are a children's publisher, so we do graphic novels for ages 4 to college. So that's a pretty big spread of ages, but it is specific to kids and teens. On every bookshelf also means variety. So it means different genres. It means mysteries, it means contemporary, it means science fiction and fantasy, it means nonfiction, it means all sorts of different subjects. And the other aspect of on every bookshelf that I like to call out is diversity. It means every kid should see themselves in a book. And that we're a year into publishing, so that's a bit of a long-term goal for what our bookshelf looks like, but that's what we're aiming for.
Okay, cool. And could you say a little bit, since this group is almost everybody here is a creator, can you talk a little bit about submissions and like what you're looking for? Are you open to non-agented pitches?
Yeah, we are open to submissions. We take both agented and unagented submissions. We see a lot of both agented and unagented submissions. They're totally happy to get those either way. In general, what we look for in a submission is an outline and a representative sample. That could be a chapter. It could be maybe a little less than a chapter, depending on how long your chapters are. Definitely, if you are someone who does writing and art, we want to see the art, and we want to see, not just the character lineup, but how you're doing your panels and all of the comics elements, as well as just how the characters look and how the world looks. If you are submitting the project yourself, please also write us a pitch letter in which you tell us the shorthand about the project and also a little bit about yourself, because we want to know about the authors who are
a few minutes.
Hold on, let me You know what? I'm going to mute everybody and then unmute you, Gina, okay?
Sounds good.
Almost.
I guess I have to ask you to unmute. Oh, there you go. Okay, good.
Yeah, so that is our submissions format. You know, as far as submissions, like we really are looking for a graphic novel on every bookshelf. So that does mean, you know, all these different ages, all these different genres, you know, uh, all these different stories. So we are open to receiving submissions about pretty much anything across the board, as long as it's a graphic novel.
Is there anything you're not looking for?
Well, we don't publish porn or erotica. We don't publish picture books. We don't publish hybrid books. Yeah, that is, and hybrid books means, like, you know, there are pages of prose and then there's a comics element or a comics pages. We only publish things that are entirely comics all throughout.
Mhm. Got it. Okay. All right. You know, I had a question right before you came on the Zoom from somebody here about Twitter pitches. So they've become, you know, that's a really popular thing these days, these sort of Twitter events where people pitch on Twitter. Is that something that you are interested in? What do you think about those types of events?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are cool.
Oh,
And
you're muted. Oh, wait.
I think
Now, I don't know what happened to your sound.
you can't hear me?
I can't hear
No?
you. What happened?
Okay. My
Oh, never mind. Then it's my problem. My problem. Never mind.
Okay, well, I guess Janna will figure out.
Now I can hear. Oh, it's my internet connection. Unstable.
Okay, great. Thanks for the comments, everyone. I'm glad that my sound is still working. So Twitter pitches are great. We do follow them. I think they're really useful. You know, we do a lot of things to try to look for new authors to work with. We go and talk to groups like you all. We try to go to schools. We go to conventions and meet new authors there. But of course, there are always people that, you know, sometimes even if they are in those places, we don't necessarily see them. You know, we miss the third floor of the convention space. We, you know, had X amount of portfolio review slots open for the school and someone didn't get them. So, or there are people who don't have a background of art school, who aren't in a place where they can travel and attend a convention and don't have one locally. And I am all for the more ways for people who, you know, I might not have seen or who might not have those opportunities to be more visible, and online is a great space for that.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna read this question exactly. Does the trend toward diverse voices include non-North American, non-Anglo-Europe creators? And does a diversity quota exist in acquisition?
Yeah, I think that this is a really interesting question. You know, I think I don't want to call diversity a trend, right? I mean, I think that it is the extremely white publishing industry come over a small period of time coming to realize that the demographics in America are not the same demographics that are represented by staff in the publishing industry, and looking to adjust their list to accommodate that and to accommodate the readers that are in America. So that is not so much a trend as a kind of, you know, a publishing attitude brought about by systemic racism adjusting and changing. So that is happening. Because that is happening, there are definitely a lot of publishers who have had historically very white very heterosexual, very um, uh, neurotypical author lists who are looking at their lists and saying, yes, what I need to do is acquire many different books than the books that are on this list right now. Um, at Random House Graphic, we're not quite in that position because we're a year old. So we have a little bit of a smaller list, a smaller back catalog to work in. So we are very interested, as I said, talking about our motto, our mission statement, in featuring diverse voices. And definitely that's something that we're looking for in encompassing our vision of including books from everyone and for everyone. The question of does that everyone include people who are not in North America is really fascinating because as a publisher who is based in North America, our main audience is readers in North America. We work with booksellers, librarians, comic book sellers, teachers, and all of those outlets are North America. And what we do is we have an amazing rights department, and they sell translation rights to the other countries in other places than the US and Canada. Which includes the UK and Australia. So when we are making a book, the focus for our audience is Canada and North America. And I do think every bookshelf and looking at the world today and globalization, like it's important for people to be thinking about the rest of the world, but as a component of how we publish things, it is an interesting and difficult balance to try to strike about how those books are presented to a North American audience. You have books like Persepolis, where that story is very much presented as an other story, something that's not happening in America. Is that the story that we want to be presenting here? Do we want to be presenting a story that's a not Native American voice or a non-Anglo-Europe creator as a story of a person who is very similar to a person who's in America? So there's a lot of complicated questions to navigate through, and it very much depends on the story and how that works for North America. So the second part of that was this is the first time I've been asked that question. So that was maybe not the most articulate way to answer that. And I also think it's we always are taught to think that stories are universal, right? Like a great story will reach everyone. And I think that's true. I believe it. But also, as a person who has a sales hat as part of my job, the sales places I'm specifically trying to reach when I make a book are here, where I live, which is in North America. So yeah. Then Janna, the second part of your question about diversity quotas. Mm-hmm. So this is another interesting question. And, the answer is, I'm not sure. And also it depends on the publisher. So, depending on any publisher you work with, they may be looking at a whole host of different things in how they acquire books. Um, they could be looking at age categories. They could be looking at commercial versus literary. They could be looking at prose versus graphic novels. They could be looking at diversity. They could be looking at gender. They could be looking at, series. They could be looking at all of these things in their list and how everything is breaking out. And diversity is definitely an element there. Like, I definitely, at the end of the year, every year, look at, what were our acquisitions this year? How many middle grade books did we buy? How many YA books did we buy? How many books by POC authors did we buy? How many books by women did we buy? How many books by queer creators did we buy? And I look at those not to say, oh, we didn't buy, 1,000% of our books by queer creators. I look at them to see, how many did we do last year? How many did we do the year before? How many did we do this year? How is that number changing? Is it in a way that I feel comfortable with? Does the way that it's changing mean that there's a hole or a space that next year I want to fill in a different way? Is what I did this year really good, and I want to continue doing this in future years? And look at it in terms of that. Other publishers might handle this entirely differently, and I am one publisher at one of there's like 11 imprints at Random House Children's Books. And the way I handle this is not necessarily the way anyone else at Random House Children's Books handles this when they're looking at their acquisitions, much less, the people at Simon & Schuster or Scholastic or Harcourt or anything like that.
So one of the things you mentioned, Gina, was literary versus genre or something like that, I think you said. And that sort of goes right into the next question I have, which is, why do YA graphic novel publishers seem to be shying away from genre like fantasy or adventure? Is this because of editor taste, because of the size of the library market, or simply a symptom of the notion that non-literary contemporary comics are just escapist fluff?
Well, I think this is an interesting question. I mean, I would say, as someone we're publishing 3 YA graphic novels this year. One of them is nonfiction. One of them is a contemporary mystery, and one of them is an epic fantasy book. So I feel like we're kind of right across the board with different YA categories. I would say that the vast majority of YA graphic novel pitches, and in fact, the vast majority of pitches that I get, are fantasy and adventure and science fiction. And, I have some thoughts about that. I think that graphic novels tend to be classified as genre books, and that there are a lot of readers who later become creators, who come to comics because they really like science fiction and fantasy, who come to it for like a fun, exciting read in the same way that science fiction and fantasy are. I think that the superhero legacy of comics means that many people come to comics through that, and people who are superhero readers tend to be thinking about science fiction and fantasy in relationship to their work. But the thing with getting most of your pitches that are science fiction fantasy and trying to have a balanced list, it means that most books that I turn down are science fiction and fantasy, because that's the lion's share of the pitches that I get. So I would I would say that, um, that's an element there. Another thing here is that um, many of the award-winning and best-selling graphic novels that have been published in YA recently are literary and contemporary. Um, so you look at um, the I don't think we have a good awards example from last year. No, Dragon Hoops by Nguyen, which is YA and autobiographical, was a finalist for an honor book for the Prince Award last year. Displacement by Kiku Hughes was an honor book for the Asian Pacific American Library Association last year. Tyler Fetter's Dancing at the Pity Party was a finalist, an honor book for the Sidney Taylor Award last year. 2 years ago, Rivka, as you say, Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me kind of swept all of these different awards. It was a Prince Award finalist, all of these things. And that same year, Kiss Number 8 by Colleen A.F. Venable and Ellen Crenshaw was an honor book for the National Book Awards. So many publishers seeing that success may be like, perhaps I should publish a book like one of those that is getting awards and honors kind of across the board.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's see. Okay, another really interesting question. Are webtoons and manga on editors' radar at all? Do they see it as an opportunity or as a threat? Is a manga-esque project less likely to be picked up?
Yeah, this is another really interesting question. So I would say that I know webtoons, the platform webtoons and manga are both on my radar, and I occasionally read comics online and I read manga. I think that online comics and manga are both great. They are not so much a threat, I would say, as two other things that are not things that I'm doing. I, as a publisher, we publish ebooks. When we do our books, we don't serialize our books online. I say that we would never publish a graphic novel in translation from Japan, but that is like not our main bread and butter. Our main bread and butter is original graphic novels for the North American market. But I do see that the popularity of online comics and the popularity of comics, of manga, makes an increased opportunity for graphic novel publishing in North America in general. And definitely some of the things that are interesting with online comics, which is like easy online readability, easy online accessibility, we think about while making and distributing our ebooks and seeing where those ebooks live and what opportunities that they have. And with manga, both about the kinds of stories that people make in manga with, girl-focused stories, which has been a big pitch in contemporary kids graphic novel publishing, with sports-themed stories, which are kind of still a thing that's picking up in contemporary American kids graphic novel publishing. With series books at an accelerated space. Those are things that people are definitely seeing and also are having an effect on the way that they acquire and publish books. I would say that the question about a manga-esque project is interesting because there are so many things about manga-esque projects, right? One of them is like an anime tie-in. Obviously, if you have a graphic novel that is already an animated series, probably a publisher will be excited to do a book. The one of them is, series accelerated publishing. If you can, draw a series of 200-page graphic novels that come out 3 times a year, I think publishers would be delighted to talk to you about that. One of them is black and white. Black and white is a harder sell in the US market because most of the kids' comics that are original North American that are working are in color. Same thing with having the book read backwards. Like, that's really fun, and I love reading manga like that, but the graphic novels that are in the kids section in North American booksellers read front to back. So yeah, and the thing that manga does with story structure, where a lot of manga used to be, is a collection that was previously serialized in a magazine. So you have a book that doesn't necessarily have like a beginning and the end and an end. I feel like that is dependent on a particular editor's taste, but mostly people's preferences with this tend to be, as far as I can see, that while there can be a longer series arc, that individual books feel very fulfilling, especially if they can't come out 3 times a year, so that 3 months later you can pick up the next volume and get the next kind of bite of the story.
All right, so Gina, we're starting to get questions in the chat, and actually Panayota sent me some questions directly to me. Maybe we can take a little break from me asking questions and let other people here ask questions. So Panayota, are you able to talk? All right, I'm not sure if she can. So I'm going to ask you her question. So
Okay.
she said, first of all, technical question, which I know everybody's probably wondering about. If we want to submit to you, do we submit to rhgraphic@penguinrandomhouse.com, or is there a specific submission site?
Nope, that is a great email to use. Feel free to email rhgraphic@penguinrandomhouse.com.
Okay. And if you are an author only, how much of the manuscript do you need in a pitch? Or should we get an artist first?
So if you're an author only, I would say don't get an artist first, unless you and the artist are kind of co-creating the project together, in which case that's great. But if you're just like, I'm a writer, I'm writing this graphic novel, you'll want to submit that solo directly, at least for us at Random House Graphic. So there's 2 things here. I mean, one of them is, what we would like is a representative sample. So it's like an outline and maybe like 3 chapters. If your book is a 200-page book that's 3 chapters long, perhaps that's an outline in 1 chapter, so something that is long enough to give us a sense of the book. I also want like information on the other things that you've written and maybe links to them. So if this is the first thing that you've ever written that's gotten published, I might want to see something longer to kind of see not just the first chapter and how that looks, but like, how are you at writing a conclusion? Like, how are you at the middle part of the story?
Okay. So how detailed, she also asked, how detailed of an outline do you need? I guess if you were just getting part of the manuscript, how detailed should the outline be?
You can always send something that's like a page or 2, and then if I need more information, then I will email back and ask.
Okay, awesome. Jessica, are you here? Can you unmute?
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, so my question is, I'm really enjoying Donut Feed the Squirrel, or Donut Feed the Squirrels, and I was wondering if you had any insight on where the early reader graphic novel market is and is going and what people are responding to.
I so appreciate that you said that, because we love those books too. And also, we have just gotten this one in the mail today. It literally came at like 6 something. So I am pleased to be able to hold it up and be like, book two, book two. I haven't even opened it up yet, so hopefully it looks good inside and printed well. We'll see. But I love these books. So the early reader graphic novel market, I have a lot of very specific opinions about. But it does seem like across the board, waiting for a truck to go by. Across the board, publishers are really getting into this category, and they're getting into it in a lot of different ways. Toon Books kind of pioneered the idea of doing specifically early reader graphic novels, and by reader graphic novels, I mean leveled readers, like level 1, level 2, level 3, where they have specific rules about like how long are all the words, how long are all the sentences, how many panels are on a page, and are doing that in association with the rules for leveled readers on that level. So they're doing that program. Harper is doing an early reader program specifically, again, with those levels. And so is Simon & Schuster. Other publishers are not doing a leveled reader program, but instead are doing a program where they're doing graphic novels that are kind of the next step after that. So the thing that my classic reader example is like Amelia Bedelia, right? So like the thing that a kid would be like, I am reading this independently after reading Amelia Bedelia when I'm in kindergarten and first grade and second grade and maybe third grade. I can pick this up and read it myself. It still has a lot of those parameters of very few panels on a page. A lot of the words are pretty short. If there is a complex word, it's clearly explained in the context or by the other characters. The art is probably pretty simple and easy to navigate throughout the panels. There's usually only one character talking per panel, or if they're not, that is balanced by more silence in the rest of the page, or that's an extraordinary moment that's happening. And the other thing is that these are pretty short, right? So they're like 64 to 112 pages. And Donut Feed the Squirrels is kind of on the longer end of that. And we've seen, Narwhal and Jelly and books like Pizza and Taco and PB&J from Harper Alley and Bun Bun and Bon Bon from Scholastic that are much more on the 64 page end of things. So the cool thing about this is that I feel like people have been publishing YA graphic novels like forever, right? Like YA graphic novels like all the time, and it's kind of like this category is growing. It's not growing as fast as middle grade, but it's still growing. It's like continuing to grow. And with chapter book graphic novels, it feels like people really started to lean into publishing them last year. And this category is just like, and so it's just getting bigger. It's selling well. The books are doing really well. More publishers are looking to buy books for this category. More authors are pitching us books in this category. So I'm pretty excited about it.
Awesome. All right. Let's see. Lex. Are you here, Lex?
Yeah. Hi, thanks for doing this. I was curious, how do you describe Random House Graphics aesthetic versus other imprints like First Second or Harper Alley? Because when I go to your website, the books they all look great and have a very specific vibe. So as the editorial director, how do you categorize that look?
Well, thank you for that compliment. It mostly goes to our authors, and then it also goes to our senior designer, Patrick Crotty, who is responsible for making all of our books look awesome. So, I mean, and a lot of that, comes from him and his sensibility. I guess, it's an interesting question because, as I kind of said at the beginning, we have these books that are across all sorts of different sensibilities and age categories. And, we want our YA books to look different from our books for 4-year-olds. And we want our books that are mysteries to look different than our books that are fantasy novels. And, I hope that's the case. But we also really want our books to fit on the shelves next to their graphic novel counterparts, like other graphic novels that are like these books for the same age category and readers, but also fit on the shelf well next to the prose books that are the counterparts of these books. So I can pull out my Amelia Bedelia example and be like, we want, this graphic novel, Apple of My Pie, or its first book, Don't Feed the Squirrels, to look like the sort of thing that someone who's reading, Little Bear or Frog and Toad or George and Martha or Amelia Bedelia to be like, yeah, this looks like something that I could read next, that I would want to read next. And the same thing with, YA novels and The Magic Fish, which I have somewhere under my desk. Or something that's middle grade and, a book like Witches of Brooklyn. So I hope that helps. I mean, definitely we're not going out there and saying we'd like all of our books to look the same. There are some things that do look the same, like we have our logo on the spine, we have a a lockup on the back cover where next to the ISBN, it all has the logo and a bar. But other than that, we want every book to really realize the vision and the sensibility that the author and the story have.
So it sounds like there's definitely you're coming at it from more literary connecting, as opposed to the ghettoizing of this is the graphic novel section. It sounds like you're this is the book section. These are the titles that are similar. It doesn't really matter if it's a graphic novel or a storybook. Is that sort of the connective tissue? That's what it sort of sounded like.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the whole graphic novel section in ghettoizing is an interesting thing, right? Because we have data from Barnes and Noble, who recently started a kids graphic novel section, and we know how much our books were selling there before, and now they have a graphic novel section, and they took all the kids graphic novels either from the adult section or from where they were intershelving them with the prose and put them all in a section together. And the sales went up because people who are looking for graphic novels could find the graphic novels all in one place instead of trying to hunt around the store and not finding them successfully. So, I really like that stores are doing that. I think that having, yes, exactly, Ed. I think that, that's so valuable. I know that back when B&N used to have an LGBTQ section, I used to go there and look for books all the time, and I would end up picking up something that I would see on that shelf. And now that they don't, I only can find LGBTQ books by researching them ahead of time when I go to the store, or during Pride Month when they do a Pride display. So, the fact that for graphic novels, if I want a graphic novel, I can go to the graphic novel section and say what's here. Or if I go to the graphic novel section because I want to buy the new, Kate Reed Petty and Andrea Bell book, The Leak. And then I, look at the shelves and I'm like, oh, there's this new volume of Investigators as well. I'm more likely to, find the similar things that I want near each other. So, that's kind of my mini talk about shelving. But I do think that comics are an essential part of the literary landscape in North America, and they have not been considered an essential part of the literary landscape in North America their entire existence in publishing in this country. And so we want to make comics, bring them forward to have that presence, and that means in some cases talking about them in the context of comics, and in some cases talking about them in the context of books. A YA graphic novel is a YA book, just like a prose book. It is also a comic. So, at a panel at a convention, a YA graphic novelist might be on a panel with a YA prose author, or they might be on a live drawing panel with a set of cartoonists. So I think the only way to really embrace the format of graphic novels and really integrate them is to think about them in these multiple dimensions.
Rivka, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I was actually really curious if you could talk, Gina, a bit about there's a lot of talk about how to make a graphic novel, but after you've actually made the graphic novel, your marketing and PR advice, because that seems to be what you really are good at. And I would love just to kind of hear more about what you recommend for authors, creatives to do after they've made the book.
Yeah, so I mean, Rivka, I think that is an interesting question, and it's different for every book, which makes it complicated, and it's different for every author too, which makes it complicated. I think the first thing to think about is that, as the author, your editor and your publisher, they're going to love your book, obviously, but you are going to be the number one champion for your book and it getting out there and what you want to happen with it. So maybe you, as an author, you don't really have thoughts about that. You're just kind of like, I'm happy for whatever. But maybe as an author, you really do have thoughts about it. Maybe you're like, this book I'm writing specifically for, kids who are experiencing financial instability, and I want the story to get out there for them and to be really reaching those kids. So if that's the case, if I was that author, I would sit down with my agent, maybe Janna, who can play my agent in this case, and be like, I really want to be reaching these kids. What can I do? What can I do personally? What ideas do you have? Talk to other authors I know who have had books published and get their thoughts about what they've done that's really worked, what they've done that hasn't worked. And then, you and your agent go to your publisher and say, this is the big priority for me. This is the audience that I feel I really want to be reaching. We have some thoughts. Here are things I'm thinking I can do. What about you? What can you do to make this happen? And that example that I gave is kind of a microcosm of things, right? I have a book with one specific goal. Maybe you don't have a book with one specific goal, because whoever only has one specific goal, right? You want to do a book which is really good so that you can make your next amazing book. You want to do a book that builds your author platform so that you start getting school visit requests, so that when you publish your next amazing book, even more people just automatically read it because they already know you as an author. You want to do your book that is reaching kids experiencing financial instability but you would also like it to like win some awards and get starred reviews and get good media. So kind of figuring out in your head where you want to be, and if there are connections and sorry, my answering machine is going off, just give it a minute. You know, if there are connections you have, if there are connections that you can make, you know, if there is work that you can personally do to make that happen. And sometimes that work is, you know, you being like, you know, I'm doing this book, it's not about financial instability, it's about like fish. And, you know, it is the graphic novel that will bring fish to the forefront of graphic novels, like Finding Nemo did for fish in movies. You know, and you're just like, I want to speak at all the aquariums in the country and for them all to do a fish graphic novel summer reading program. And I want to, you know, have all of the fish academic publications like review this book and recommend this, you know, kids fish graphic novel as the thing that fish researching academics should be sharing with all fish researching academics that they know, and, you know, teaching in college classes as an example of fish education for children. You know, like with that book, you as a person who's writing this essential fish graphic novel can get started early establishing relationships with fish museums and talking to them and being like, I'm writing a fish graphic novel, you have this exhibit, like, can I, you know, I've been looking at your live stream, like, here's the fish I drew, like, feel free to use it for your social media. You know, there are fish academics that you can send drafts of your chapter and be like, did I get the fish drawing right? Like, you are an expert in fish, like, please tell me. You know, so as you're working and kind of leaning into all things fish, like what is the network that you can build so that when your book comes out, and you email all of these fish people personal individual emails about how important they were for your work process, that they will be like, Rivka, like your fish are so amazing and I've been part of this process all along. I would love to do all of the things with my fish related community to get this graphic novel to many more readers. You know, and like not everyone is going to respond to emails like that, but you want to kind of think about if there are things to do along those lines that can lay that groundwork.
Yeah, I feel like what you're saying, Gina, is essentially that it's important to start thinking about the community that's going to support your book far in advance of the publication date, and really and not just, you know, foist upon them a month before your book's coming out. Hey, I'm an author. I have this book. It's related to this subject. Please promote it for me.
Yeah, but I mean, I would also, so I like went on this whole tirade about fish. And I mean, this new fish graphic novel, it does sound fascinating if all of these things would happen. But, you know, maybe you are like, I can't do that. Like, I have the time and energy to make this book, and in the rest of my time, I have a girlfriend and I have to make dinner every night, and I, you know, tutor kids, and I, you know, work in my local comics community, helping them with their festival. And I do not have time to like do all of these fish things. You know, I think agents are really good in this case because you can be like, help, in the ideal world, I would do all these fish things, but I cannot, like, what should I do? And your agent will kind of talk you through like, okay, like maybe you'll send one fish email a month. Maybe you'll send one fish email every 6 months. Maybe, you know, we'll make a list of the top priorities and do the top 5, and the other things we can tell your publisher we want them to handle and see what they come together on. Maybe your agent says, you got a really nice advance, so why don't you see if we can save, $5,000 of this to hire a freelancer to help make those connections. So it's all a matter of kind of looking at your resources and what you can do, because we all have a finite amount of time and energy and like stamina that we can put into this, and see what are the things that are going to make the most effect for you and be the most generative for you, and that you can accomplish with the different resources that you have.
Thanks, Gina. That gave me a lot of ideas, but yeah, especially with the fish.
I have more questions, so I'll just ask this one, which I thought was interesting. Do editors assemble teams? Like, can you talk a little bit about we touched on the idea of an author-only manuscript coming to you and you acquiring that, and then you with your team would find artists to match with it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes we'll get a script and we're like, the script is great. And then we will, think about what the sort of art style is that we think that this would be best for the script. We talk with the author about what sort of art style we think would be best for the script. When I've done this, I generally then come up with a list of people and then talk to the author about the individual artists that I think would be best for the script, and then approach those people and like one by one and see who we can get to do the book. We find that list of artists through our, all the things I said: school visits, Twitter pitches, going to conventions, like all of, portfolio reviews, all of these things. And then, keep an eye on people and, tell people who, whose art we love, who we may think we want a graphic novel with eventually, but maybe not yet, that, or maybe they don't have an idea yet, that to keep in contact with us. And we kind of go down that list and say, who's the person that we most want to work with.
Cool. I did get some interesting questions about agents. So one is it necessary to have an agent that is well versed with graphic novels versus an agent that is established in other genres but new to graphic novels? Do you have any thoughts about that?
So it depends. You want to have an agent who will understand your book and your project and your process, and who you feel, and who feels themselves that they're like comfortable and confident in advocating for you. So, sometimes that's an agent who hasn't ever done a graphic novel before, who has a lot of experience across the board with other kinds of books, who is just like, no worries, I work at a large agency and there's other people here who do graphic novels. If I need some help, I just like go down the hall to my colleague's office and say, you rep these 5 graphic novelists. This person's emailing me about needing more time because of colorist issues. Like, is that normal? Like, tell me, guide me through this. And sometimes that means, someone who has that experience themselves, that they're like, oh yes, I've worked with, only graphic novel clients for the past 3 years. Like, you're not going to bring me a challenge you're having with your graphic novel that I won't be like, oh yeah, I dealt with that, 2.5 years ago. Here's what we did then. Will that work for you? I know I can argue this publisher into it. I think either is fine. It's most important to have an agent who really works with you, who you feel comfortable with, you feel like you can talk to, who you know will advocate for you. And, someone who, if it is good to have someone who, if they haven't worked with graphic novels before, is willing to find out more information about how they work. And, listen to you when you're having a question or a challenge or a problem.
Okay, Leo, you have a question.
Yeah, thanks, Jenna. Gina, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. My question is kind of dovetailing with what Rivka is saying about marketing. I kind of want to pick your brain on that. And what I'm hearing, your response to her question was really specific to kind of the maker. And if you've got a fish book, this is based on what your topic is, how to approach the market. And I'm curious, someone in, with your experience in marketing, one is, how have you seen marketing outlets change from, when you started with First Second to where you are now today? And kind of, what are your go-tos? Like, what do you, this is my top 5 marketing outlets.
Yeah, Leo, I think that's a good question too. I feel like I focused on the specific in my last answer, but there definitely are some standard things to think about for all books. This past year has been very virtual, right? So like everything has been like social media, virtual events, virtual conferences, virtual everything, which is like not how things usually are at all. But social media is a typical staple of marketing and publicity. Everyone can do it. It does not cost money. You are able to potentially build up some following for yourself as an author that not only is for your book that you're currently working on, but can carry on to future books that you're working on. Media, which is kind of divided up into like general publicity, like interviews or reviews and articles, and the trade media, which is things like Publishers Weekly and Kirkus and School Library Journal, which are focused on reaching people in the industry. So reaching like booksellers and librarians and in some cases teachers, like the people who are buying books. Both of those things are important. And then, trade related marketing, which is the marketing that's reaching bookstores and comic stores and making sure that you're communicating with them about your book coming out, offering them any material they need to help promote it. School and library marketing, which is all about reaching teachers and librarians. It can be things like discussion guides. It can be, in school and library is sometimes a lot about winning awards and being on reading lists, and having materials for librarians in the case of something like that happening. So I got trade marketing, I got school and library, I got online, just like social, and also like websites and other online things. I think social is kind of the main thing, but it tends to be good to have a personal website so that publishers can find you. And if they're like, who is this person, Leo Quiles, who is submitting this book to me? I will Google them. They're like, yes, here's their portfolio and a bio and some information about them. And then, sorry, I usually do this by like TikToking around our office, but then we haven't been in the office for so long that I'm like, what are the different divisions? But yeah, then we had media, and I feel like there's one more, but there's always this this fifth thing, which is just kind of like the fish thing, which is the like individual to the book. We need to reach fish outlets, we need to reach food outlets, we need to reach youth who are having financial instability. Like, what is the specific thing to do in relation to that?
Mm-hmm.
That's perfect. Thank you, Gina. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Oh, and events. Also, events are good too. They kind of fold in under media, but conferences, festivals, events, books, speaking at bookstores, speaking at schools, libraries, comic stores, all of that.
So sort of running on to that question, I have a question here. How do graphic novel publishers use digital to promote? And what are your thoughts on publishing free online first?
Well, so when we publish books, we also publish an ebook edition. So there is an ebook that's out there that people can buy. We at Random House Graphic, I haven't done anything with kind of building a website and publishing something for free, kind of running up to the publication. Some of this is just because we published for ages 4 to college. We're publishing 3 YA graphic novels a year. That means most of the books that we're publishing are for kids 12 and under who aren't maybe necessarily the biggest webcomics audience. Also the books that we publish aren't necessarily meant to be read kind of a page at the time. And many of them do have chapters, but they have like 3 chapters. So if you try to publish them a chapter at a time running up to the publication, you don't get much of a run up. So there isn't that kind of like, hi, I've developed this audience over the past year. It is more like, in the 2 weeks before publication, all of this book went online for free and people didn't find it because it's something new that they didn't, like what is the thing that's pointing people to it? So the other part of this question is should you publish your book online as publishers will see it and want to pick it up? And I generally say to this that I think it's better to, if you have a book that's in a state where you can publish it for free online, to try submitting it to publishers first, because publishers may have different opinions about whether they would like you to publish it for free online, which they can weigh in on if they're interested in publishing it beforehand, before you publish it for free online. Whereas if you publish it for free online and then email them and they're like, well, I'm not into publishing things free online, then you have shot yourself in the foot a little.
Gibson, do you want to ask that? You had a question following up on that.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on material for books that you've optioned and you have contracted for publication for the artists to make those available to something like their Patreon audience, which is a closed, limited group of people before publication?
Yeah. We plenty of times do the thing where we'll be like, here's an exclusive excerpt for media outlet X. And we tend to view this sort of thing with Patreon in the same way, that, there's an exclusive excerpt for readers there. We've had authors do in-process art. We've had authors share their pitches. We've had authors share first chapters. We've had authors share kind of a segment of things, or a giant JPEG image of all of the pages of their book, but not in a I can read this book by zooming in really close sort of way. And that there aren't any problems with any of that. We don't want people to be like, dear my Patreon, here's my entire graphic novel as a PDF that you can all download. But I think that is pretty easy to avoid.
Thank you.
Oh, does anybody want to, I feel like we can kind of wrap it up. Does anybody have a last question you want to ask Gina?
My overhead light is off, so I feel like I'm perhaps becoming a ghost.
Well, me too. I said it was going to happen. It's going to get really dark.
You have an actual answering machine?
Yes.
we're all asked out.
Wait, will
Okay.
we do more episodes of graphic novel TK? Because I adore them.
Oh, thank you so much, Rivka. So there are several more episodes of graphic novel TK. I think we have 3 of them that are recorded now. We did record one of them like 3 weeks ago about like publishing during the pandemic and what that was like. My poor co-host is somehow saddled herself with the job of editing all the episodes, so she's still working through those 3. Right now, that's kind of what we have plans for, because the idea was, the concept was like start at the pitch and then end at the last episode. It's called Your Next Book. And but we also have all of these ideas about having more of the back matter sort of episodes, like the one we did with Sarah Winifred Searle, that are less about the pitch to next book arc and more about specialized topics like being a newspaper cartoonist, or kids graphic novels, or there is a whole list that I am temporarily forgetting many of the other things in it, but like things like that are more topic driven than overall publishing process driven. But we still have to figure out if that is something that we have time and space and energy for. But there are at least 3 more that are in the works.
Wonderful. Okay, I think this was really, really, really great, Gina. You answered I feel like we covered a lot of kind of standard topics, but we also did it in a really, really interesting way, and you gave a lot of very, very specific information. So that was super, super cool. Can everybody unmute yourself so we can say good night and thank you?
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
That
you,
was
Gina.
awesome.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Fantastic.
Have a good night.
Night.
Night. Bye.
Bye.
We have an answering machine too.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.